It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Our guest today is John Gold. He's author of the book, We Were Lied To About 9/11. And you can find that on his website, wewere-lied-to-about911.com. He's also done a couple of really, really excellent documentary films, 9/11, Press for Truth, and then there's a sequel to it. You can find both of these on YouTube. In their own words, the untold stories of the 9/11 families. I've been watching them all morning long, and it's very, very powerful, powerful work. John Gold, are you there?
Yes, I am, Ed. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you so much. What a heavy topic, man, and what heavy documentaries. I've really been moved today. Before we get it, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I just want to correct you on one thing. I did not have anything to do with making the movies. I just gave them the money to finish the movie because it was so important to me that they get done. So I can tell you who was responsible for it, but we can go on.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that because I didn't say your name on the Wikipedia page. But before we get into all of that and the movies and the topic and stuff like that, tell us about yourself. Who is John Gold?
John Gold is just a Joe Schmo American who saw that we were being lied to about 9/11, and for the past almost 20 years now, almost 20 years, tried to correct the situation, tried to help the families. I've tried to help the 9/11 first responders. And I'm just a regular guy. I was a website designer, developer for about 15 years in the industry. And no, I'm not married, don't have any kids. I live in Philadelphia, was born and raised. And I just try to do the right thing.
Now, you wrote the book, We Were Lied To About 9/11, but you said you wrote more than one book?
Yeah, the first book is called 9/11 Truther, The Fight for Peace, Justice, and Accountability. That was released in January 2012, I believe. And the We Were Lied To About 9/11, the interviews book, I did a series of 31 interviews, and I interviewed what I considered to be the best of the best concerning the issue. The first person I spoke to was Jenna Orkin, who was very much involved with the environmental impact of 9/11. The second person I spoke to was Mickey Huff, who was the director of Project Censored, and we talked about how the media in this country works. The family members. I spoke to Senator Pop Graham. I spoke to the New York Times reporter, Phil Sheenan, who covered the 9/11 Commission. I spoke to everybody I could. And that's what I did. A lot of people asked me for transcriptions of the interviews, and Mickey Huff suggested that I put it into a book. And that's what happened. It took a year and a half, cost me thousands of dollars, and I gave it away for free. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want this incredibly important information to be made available only to those that could afford it. And that's it. I'm not here to make money. I'm not here to become famous or anything like that.
So both books are for free on wewere-lied-to-about911.com.
The second book tells you how to get the first book for free. Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's available on Amazon, but I give it away for free. I don't care.
Well, it's good to have it on Amazon, even if you are giving it away for free, because then people can find it too. When they search for it, they'll see it on Amazon there. And you can always put in the description, hey, it's free. Contact me, go to my website. Oh, boy. Okay, what were we lied to about?
Oh, great many things. We were told there were no warnings. There were just multitudes of warnings from different countries. We were told that the source of the funding was, quote, of little practical significance for the attacks. NORAD lied, the CIA lied, and the FBI lied about so many different things. And, I want to address something about conspiracy theories because I'm so sick of seeing that phrase. First of all, it's human nature when those who should be able to answer our questions refuse to do so. It's human nature to question why. So to quote unquote theorize about what's happening or what happened on that day is perfectly normal. But stating theory as fact is wrong. trying to force theories on other people is wrong. Creating litmus tests about theories is wrong. You either believe this or you're this or that. It's irresponsible, I believe. And the media, glommed onto the phrase back in when the JFK assassination happened, I believe.
Which was, by the way, the idea that was a conspiracy with more than one. Was it Oswald by himself, or were others involved? A conspiracy. But now conspiracy's taken on a whole new meaning. It doesn't even have the same meaning that it's supposed to. But I get what you're saying.
Now it means made up fairy tale. The word conspiracy literally means made up fairy tale based on how the media has portrayed it over the years. And all it means, as you said, is more than one person committing a crime. By definition, 9/11 was a conspiracy.
I know.
More than one person committing a crime. So either you agree with the quote unquote theory the government put forward about the attacks, or you don't. And I don't, because I saw how many lies they put forward.
Well, let's start with this. Do you believe our government knew in advance?
Do I think the government knew in advance?
Yeah.
There's so much information to suggest they did. Yeah, I do.
Give us some examples.
In 2007, there was an event held in Hartford, Connecticut. And one of the Jersey girls, first off, the Jersey girls, who were the stars of the documentary you spoke of, 9/11 Press for Truth, they were the 4 widows responsible for making Washington, D.C. create the 9/11 Commission, something Washington, D.C. didn't want to do. So one of the Jersey girls, her name is Patty Casaza, she showed up at the event we were having, and she told us that they had met whistleblowers on the side of the road that said this government knew the date, the time, and the type of attack that was going to take place. And that's just one instance. And that's another thing. The 9/11 Commission didn't speak to whistleblowers for some reason, even though they told the families that each and every person would be heard. So she said that, and let's see, there was something called the August 6th PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing, which is what actually got me off to the races on 9/11. The first thing that took place was in January of 2002, Bush and Cheney went to Tom Daschle's office, who was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, and asked him specifically not to investigate the attacks at all. Then, in May 15th, 2002, news of what was called the August 6th PDB was leaked. And it said that, it talked about hijackings or other types of attacks. It talked about buildings in New York City. It talked about all kinds of things. And that was focused on greatly by the 9/11 Commission. But there were 39 other PDBs having to do with Al-Qaeda that we don't even know about, that one reporter said were worse than the August 6th PDB. I think there were 14 different countries that gave us warnings. And by the way, I want to make this available. There's a site called historycommons.org that has all of the warnings in lists to show you what the warnings were. And they were mainstream media outlets. Now, at the time of 9/11, the media in this country was a different animal, I think. I mean, it was still greatly propaganda and stuff like that, but there were reporters back then who were openly asking questions about that day. They just weren't getting the attention that they deserved. And, over the years, the media's just gotten horrible. So anyway, there was a time when you could almost trust them, like where they would report on something, but it wouldn't get the coverage it deserved, like front page coverage. It would be in the back of a paper somewhere.
Do you have any specific names of who in our government knew in advance?
Of who in the government knew in advance?
Yeah.
George Tenet is a good candidate for that. I think Cofer Black was a good candidate for that. It's possible. I don't know specifically who knew what, but I do think George Tenet knew something because he lied about meeting George W. Bush in August of 2001. 2 times, I believe. Under oath, he lied about it. In his book, he said he did meet him 2 times that month, and they spoke about, he was aware of the Moussaoui arrest prior to 9/11. I'm sorry.
You mentioned under oath, but in actuality, the 9/11 Commission, they weren't under oath. None of the witnesses were under oath, were they?
Well, in the beginning, nobody was held under oath. The families and an organization called 9/11 Citizen Watch shamed the 9/11 Commission into holding people under oath. The problem with it was that the 9/11 Commission, when the first hearing it ever had, said, we're not here to point fingers or point blame. And then at the very last one, nobody was held accountable. So even though people were held under oath and nobody was held accountable, it meant nothing. But I'm just saying, he was under oath technically.
What about the conflicts of interest of the commissioners?
Well, every commissioner had conflicts of interest, and I don't have all of those in front of me right now, but let's see. Right now I'm going to historycommons.org to try and find it because there's some lists. Anyway, let's say, for instance, Philip Zelikow. Philip Zelikow was the executive director of the 9/11 Commission. He was in charge of basically every aspect of the 9/11 Commission. He selected what questions would be asked, who would be the witnesses, and so forth. Paul Sperry explained, quote, though he has no vote, Zelikow arguably has more sway than any member, including the chairman. Zelikow picks the areas of investigation, the briefing materials, the topics of hearings, the witnesses, and the lines of questioning for witnesses. In effect, he sets the agenda and runs the investigation. In 1995, Zelikow wrote a book with Condoleezza Rice called Germany Unified and Europe Transformed, a study in statecraft. While at Harvard, quote, he worked with Ernest May and Richard Neustadt on the use and misuse of history and policy making. He did a report on the assassination of JFK that was just riddled with errors. But let me get to the 9/11 Commission. Well, he also wrote the preemptive war strategy that the Bush administration used. He tried to prevent the 9/11 Commission staffers from talking to 9/11 commissioners. He tried to insert a false connection between Iraq and 9/11 into the 9/11 report, but the families and the staffers fought against it. Select staffers of the 9/11 Commission dispute the account, though Zelikow ultimately had to approve what her name was Lori Milroy's testimony before the commission. It was alleged that he had taken direction from Karl Rove, and that was according to the New York Times reporter, Philip Sheenan. And it was supposed to be a nonpartisan, commission. Before the commission even started, Philip Zelikow in early 2003 and Ernest May wrote a complete outline of the final report. Zelikow, Keenan, and Hamilton decided to keep this outline a secret from the commission staffers when, quote, it was later disclosed that Zelikow had prepared a detailed outline of the commission's final report at the very start of the investigation. Many of the staff's investigators were alarmed. Anyway, the Saudi investigations, he blocked half of the interview requests for Saudi Arabia. One of the individuals, there was something called the Joint Congressional Inquiry, which came before the 9/11 Commission, that did a study in the 9/11, and they released a report that had 28 redacted pages having to do with Saudi Arabia. And Dana Leeseman, who worked for both the Joint Congressional Inquiry and the 9/11 Commission, trying to gain access to those 28 redacted pages, and Philip Zelikow blocked her from accessing those, even though that was her responsibility. So she went through a back channel to get access to them, and then Zelikow fired her. I even believe she had something to do with writing those 28 redacted pages.
Well, what about the whole saga with Kissinger first being appointed and then back and resigning?
Yeah, I know. Very early on, Henry Kissinger was selected by the Bush administration to be the chairman of the 9/11 Commission. Once the families, the Jersey Girls, as a matter of fact, went to his offices and asked him a few questions, some poignant questions. Have you ever had any ties to the Bin Laden family or something, business dealings with the Bin Laden family? And he apparently was squirming around in his chair, didn't want to say anything, and the next day he resigned from the position.
Because of possible connections, he had a client with Bin Laden.
Well, yeah, that was one of the questions. I believe that was in 9/11 Press for Truth.
Yeah, I think it was too. Now, what about the 19 hijackers? How is it possible for these 19 hijackers to operate in the United States and not have other